man with no patience as we head into the playoffs. Dave, we're ready for the postseason. I don't know how we got here. I don't know how this has gotten this quickly through the 11 weeks of the season. And what a week we had. One of the big, man, I had such a good time out there with you last week at the big game. I thank you so much for twisting my arm and telling me to come out to the game because I enjoyed it. A great game. I didn't think it was one-sided at all, despite the fact that I think the West Hills Wolfpack, the undefeated champions of the Grossmont Valley League, had control, a firm control of the game, even with the back and forth ping pong action early on, gaining control with the defense mid-game and then trading some more points late. But I think we predicted it at the beginning of the season that West Hills, some call them a dark horse, Dave. You and I had them as the very slightest of favorites. And I don't want to say that the result would have been different had that game been in Lakeside, but El Capitan wasn't talked about enough. Despite what Casey Ash says, they played a great game as well. I love what Coach said, how the Yoakley twins were talked about as unstoppable, and they got all the attention. And if they're all league or all world, then we've got an all league and an all world defense. And that's what he told his guys after the game. But he's the master motivator, Dave, because it was Ash himself who told the media that the Yoakley brothers were the best players in the league. So hats off to West Hills, the champions. Man, just one of the best all-around teams we've seen in a long time. You know, we could say they have some dominant superstars, but you'd be hard pressed to argue which one of them it is. And El Capitan, hats off to them too. Great season. They're headed to the playoffs. We're going to talk about all those games, Dave, but just want to know your thoughts. Thank you so much for a great night.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I'm just glad that we were able to pull it off for so many folks that when we found out, well, you found out through social media, and that's your gig. So when you relayed to me that there was nobody that was going to stream the game, including NFHS, I just thought, you know what? We had talked about it earlier in the year, and it was kind of just an idea, and it slowly fizzled out. But then here comes the biggest game of the season, which I do want to remind you that I said when I saw the schedule that especially that last game on the schedule was going to be the biggest game of the season with playoff implications. And I was on that one. I may have lost a lot of picks, but I was 100% correct on that one. Just, you know, I remember you mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, you know, even after they exchanged touchdowns early on in the first quarter, you said, "Wow, it just seems it seems a little quiet." With this type of game, with some rivalry in it, playoff implications, one team trying to stop the possibility of a history in the making for West Hills having their first undefeated season in the history of West Hills.
Yep.
And then, of course, the Tony Bernard Trophy and or Cup.
Trophy all the way.
Either way, it's an award. It's some hardware, and it's standing right alongside with the week before of the Mayor's Cup. So they've gotten their hardware, and I think now West Hills is looking for patches. I think that's their next goal, and green banners with their name. I don't know, probably a name champions in there with some CIF. I think that that is where they are headed as far as in their mind. But as you back on what you were saying, it was pretty quiet in that first quarter, even though both teams marched right down the field and we were tied. And then it seems like all of a sudden the defense is dug in, and both secondaries were ready to go, and so were those defensive lines. And then it became just a tackling frenzy. And I'll tell you what, there were some pretty brutal hits out there too. These were not any girly hits by any. Some of the hits that I've seen in the NFL have been a little soft as of late. And to see how these, don't get me wrong, these high school players were doing it by the book, but I'll tell you what, there was two groups of defenses, and I'm saying the Vaqueros and the West Hills Wolfpack. They were out there and they were playing 100%. And I think on both sides of the ball, but those defenses really, they were reigning up until about the mid third quarter, going into the fourth. But they didn't do as, neither one of them really did some the scoring until a little bit later. So it was quite competitive. I think it lived up. Everybody says don't get lost in the hype. I think that was one of Coach Ash's words of wisdom to his team when preparing for them. And I think really that is a great word of wisdom. But, they didn't. No one was really hyped up. But you know what? It was worth the hype. That game was the game of the year. And I don't care. Somebody come on and tell me right now, go into the chat and tell me that this was not the game of the year for the Grossmont Conference.
Yeah, I think it lived up to it. I don't even know if you could find a regular season game, even if it didn't have the implications of this one. I mean, certainly got to throw that into the mix, right? But I just think the drama was still there, even with a 2-score lead because of El Capitan's explosiveness. And they finally did make that big play, but really just held them to one big play, or at least the connection between Savion Yokley and Antoine Yokley that helped El Capitan stay in the game as well.
Well, I mean, when you have an athlete like, and this is no disrespect for the defense, especially that defense that plays over West Santee, and I'll say, Savvy Yokley, they did stop him, but he is an absolute athlete with a capital A. We talked about it on the broadcast, the way that the offensive players, particularly the wideouts and really even the line, they wait for what Sabi's going to do. Sabi is the ringmaster of that offense, and he waits. Or I mean, let me back up. They wait for him to direct everybody on that line, all the wideouts. They pretty much, it's almost like a slow motion, and then, okay, Sabi's going left, Sabi's going right, or he's going straight up the gut. Okay, and then they design that offensive line to go in order, and they know who they're going to block.
Well, and that's what I thought was happening late when El Capitan needed one extra big play. I don't know if the heart of the Vaqueros had kind of sunken and kind of left his skill players waiting for him to make the move and make the play. And unlike many of the regular season games, in fact, almost all of them, right, where his maneuvering behind the line of scrimmage afforded him the opportunity to buy more time to get to his receivers or to take off running. Every time he twists and turned this time, there was another black shirt or two waiting for him to try to change it up and change direction. I think at the end of the game, I saw too many yellow shirts standing around waiting to see, and maybe you have to because you got to see what he's doing, but the opportunities just weren't there. So just an incredible job by the West Hills defense in that game. Dave really did what they needed to do and prove themselves what we knew about them already, that they just are just a complete unit without a, I don't want to say without a big time star. I mean, you can name the guys off. We had several of the guys on there on the post game.
Trevor and Bimbo, as we interviewed at the end of the game.
Max Conaway had a nice night defensively as well. You know, El Capitan was without their top their top tackler this season, Dom Dena, who was out with an injury for the rest of the year. But West Hills was the one that had just a little more defense, I think, in the end. So we'll talk about these teams, Dave, again, unless you have some more on the game. What
No,
an incredible night.
I just wanted to mention just how, and Coach Ash, I'll give you that in a little bit too. But really, did you notice through that whole game, Max, for the most part, and typically, and especially the beginning of the season, Max Conaway was more of a tight end, I would say, role, and one of those that has the speed too, the size, and he definitely can catch the ball. But going across the field, he was very quick on that. He's great at running the routes and those special routes. If anybody did it, it was definitely put into Max's lap. And I saw more of that early on in the season. But then when I saw, especially this game, boy, I don't know where to play him. I mean, you want him on the offense because he's definitely a big guy. You can throw it up. Listen, Braden can throw it up, and he can go up and get it very easily. And he's a little taller than a lot of these DBs or even the safeties coming underneath or over the top. But wow, on his blocks that he had, keeping his hands up. I mean, I'm surprised that he didn't get a pick, honestly, the way he was playing defense. Just phenomenal.
Yeah, Dave, look, we saw Conaway in the beginning of the season make spectacular big plays on offense. I mean, big plays, big distance, touchdown style plays, and we haven't really seen that explosiveness. You mentioned his injuries, his upper body injuries that sidelined him part of the season. We stood right next to him. He's so tall, his ribs were like right at my eye level. I was looking at his padding to see, if that was the case, maybe you just are still protecting him from any exposure on true receiving routes. The focus for him was on defense. So if that's the case, he could still continue to get healthy. We know West Hills you talked about CIF run. I mean, if you want to pick an underdog now, West Hills, and this is your time. I mean, now West Hills is an underdog in this incredible class of Division III teams, but we're going to see West Hills, get this home game here, and then beyond that have to move on the road, but still earn the number 5 seed amongst some very good teams. And we'll talk about them and their matchup. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying is that it's I think they should be given, and I know it's based on strength of schedule as it always is, but it would be amazing. Can you imagine if they did play all of their games as far as for the remainder of the playoffs at West Hills home field? I think that would only be fair. I mean, they went undefeated, okay? But I know there's teams out there that have played tougher schedules, and that's the way they look at it, and that's how they determine a lot of this. But just we'll get into the pick and how they face off against Bonita Vista if you want to a little later, and then what Coach Ash had to say. As far as if that game is concerned. But yeah, just definitely game of the week, game of the year. It was all of those and then some. Great job, kid. Great job with the West Hills Wolfpack. But you know what? You look at the score. Great job by the El Capitan Vaqueros too. I think that they deserve just as much credit for how hard they played that game and how close they really were to staying in that game.
Yeah, and you see fans of Dylan Freund out there, family members watching, all the West Hills gang. Shout out to you guys. We know
one
you're all
last thing I want to
watching
say.
tonight and watching the replay. Go ahead, Dave.
I just wanted to mention one last thing. It was such a pleasure too. We don't get to meet a lot of the parents of these fine players. Most of the time it's just the players and the coaches, and it really was such a pleasure to meet Mrs. Conaway, for example. You were there, and after we did an interview with her son to just uh, let us know that she appreciated what we put on the show and the coverage that we provided of not only her son but of the pack this year. So
Yeah.
that really that really puts an impression on really the passion that we have for these kids and these athletes, and then to be told how appreciated you are. I mean, that just writes volumes. So, with that being said, thanks, Mrs. Conaway, and all of you that have gone out in the chat, Mrs. Snyder.
Yeah. How about Dylan Snyder holding and Ron after the game spoke to Coach Berner, and congratulated him, but it has to take some sense of pride for him as a coach to see Dylan Snyder, the way he held that Burner trophy, Dave, holding it as you would any real trophy that you really wanted to hold. And he sat on the ground after the game, holding that trophy as a sign of a victory. And that has to give Coach Burner a lot of comfort in the loss, but that they would value the trophy, the league champs, 10-0 regular season league champions, and winners of both those trophies, including the Tony Burner Memorial Trophy.
And one last touch on that. I had the camera on Coach Burner for just a minute, and maybe it was about 5 minutes, and really gives you a perspective on how much Coach Burner really appreciates the game of football, the coaching that he does for these kids, the way he coaches that program up, and how long he's done it. I kept the camera on him for about 5 minutes, and he just stared over at the West Hill sideline for a good 5 minutes, maybe a little longer. And not stunned in amazement so much, but it almost looked like just taking it all in. It was so close, and really he should be proud of his kids, and I know he was. And just to come up a little short, though, I guess it's also a little bittersweet.
Yeah.
But the good thing is those two, Coach Casey Ash and Ron Burner, being such great competitors and great friends, and have coached together before. I mean, there's so much history in this rivalry that's been created in the last couple of years. Is just awesome to be part of. But
congratulations to Coach Ash. I mean, remember he had to play some years in the Hills League. They've been on the cusp. They've played in championship games for several years, almost in a row, losing those games to Monte Vista. Some were one-sided, but they still got to that game. They had the opportunity. They were at home, and they won this game, Dave. All right. All right, Dave, we're going to get right into the playoffs. We're going to talk about West Hills again. So, hey, we know our demographic, okay? I mean, we get 300 Facebooks, 150 YouTubes, 100 on Twitter. Maybe a third of them are the Wolfpack. So we're going to talk about them and their preview game. But we're going
to. Yeah. And one last thing, I got on Instagram. I forget the name of the kid. I just wanted to add this to it. I am still taking grief for calling out the first game of the season when they played the Comets. And it basically is at me, and then it says by 7 ? And you know what I'm talking about, and they do too. As we all know, they clobbered the Kearney Comets, something fierce. But we really didn't know. I didn't know what Kearney was all about yet. So my bad. Yes, you guys destroyed them, but there's bigger fish for you guys to fry now. And moving on.
Yeah, Dave, let's get right into the playoffs now. We'll bump West Hills in Division 3 and make them wait around so we can keep our ratings up and hit the like and the smash or whatever they do. We'll get the hang of this one of these days, Dave. But let's get right into the Division 1 playoffs. Dave, it's kind of a Grossmont Hills League mini tournament in the top half of the bracket. Grossmont is going to play Steel Canyon for the second week in a row, and the winner is going to play Helix. So I'll be interested to first get your take on that, but I just want to cover how often this happens, Dave, when two conference foes, I'm talking about two league foes from the Grossmont Conference end up meeting in the playoffs. I mean, it doesn't happen too often. It happened in 2016. Valhalla went at Helix and lost a pair of games. Steel Canyon and Grossmont, they kind of had a pseudo way of doing this. Now, they didn't play back-to-back games, but interestingly, these two teams did meet in the playoffs just 6 years ago, and you might remember this playoff game. In fact, what a crazy situation. Grossmont met Steel Canyon in the regular season. This wasn't a back-to-back, but Steel Canyon beat Grossmont 39-36 at Grossmont, came back in the playoffs after Grossmont got a bye, and Steel Canyon beat him again, 39-35. In that game, Grossmont behind Hunter Gaines led 28-0 at halftime, 35-7 before Steel Canyon came all the way back and won the game on Mcgill Oliver. Blocked a punt, ran it in for a touchdown. Steel Canyon won that game. That wasn't back-to-back, but I just want to mention Grossmont, Steel Canyon meeting in the playoffs before. And, of course, the bizarre scenario that has these teams meeting up for the second week in a row at the same venue where last week, Dave, Steel Canyon defeated Grossmont 23-10 behind two touchdowns from Major Givens.
Yeah, and being back, that's what I asked early morning, actually. I would say 6 a.m. to be exact. After working a long night, but anyhow, he had a couple things to say, because I was saying, you're playing the same team. You guys are both pretty much know what to expect for the most part. I mean, there may be a couple of trick plays and in their back pocket, but not so much. I mean, you guys put everything out on the field. I mean, it was a crucial game at the end of the season for both of them, and well fought. Especially, I got to give credit to the Steel Canyon defense. I mean, yeah, they scored with Gibbons, and you always got to give it to him, but let's give credit to the defense too, that only held Grossmont to 10 points. And Coach Holmes said straight out, there's no secret formula, and that his guys need to create opportunities, win the momentum battle, and that's been the last time I saw them too winning that momentum battle. Is you got to look back a couple of weeks when they played Granite Hills at Grossmont. Grossmont started off, they were back and forth, but Grossmont scored, and they struck blood first. And, it was only a 7-0 game though, but they had the momentum for the most part. But boy, as the game wore on, Grossmont and the Foothillers took over that. They took that momentum, pick after pick, and pressuring and sacks. They really did some serious damage to that Grossmont, or to that Granite Hills offensive line, and to the quarterback that game. That's what I'm talking about, is a momentum switch. Anyway, with him saying about the momentum, and then he says here that they got to finish each and every play And just to let you know, and the folks out there following Grossmont and this game, he said they're a little banged up, unfortunately, up front in the trenches on the offensive line. So what that means to me is Giles is probably going to be on the run a little more often. If not flushed out of the pocket, he's going to be running out of that pocket pretty quick or getting rid of that ball. But we all know that for a while there, he was leading the Hillers in rushing yards anyway. So it's not something that he's not accustomed to. And then he also said, but we have the same guy. We've mowed the same guys, or moved a couple of the same guys around, I should say. Excuse me, on that line. So they're kind of putting it together a little different. I'm sure some tackles playing on different sides. Same with the guards. But lastly, he's excited that his team and offensive line should rise to the occasion. And really, I think the biggest key, it's not so much the momentum. I think in order for them to beat Steele this time, they have to use that defense to create turnovers. Obviously, the offense is not scoring very many points as of late, ever since that Granite Hills game, to be honest. And, when they did score points, it was off of turnovers. So I think if they can put that same pressure on that offensive line of Steele Canyon, I think, make some, maybe Barton will throw some, or whoever's back there can, throw some bad passes and make some picks, or even a couple of strip sacks. But I think that defensive line really needs to get after it off the edge. And I think that secondary needs to play perfect because I'll tell you what, Steele gets ahead like they did last week. I think Steele gets ahead by 2 touchdowns. It's going to be very difficult for the Hillers to come back and play the catch-up game, especially with Major Givens, because you already know what he's going to be doing. He's going to be carrying the rock, and they're going to probably just duplicate what they did last week. Because why not? Look at Hamamoto does with Monte Vista. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to give the rock to Givens. They'll throw a few passes, but I think that if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think that's exactly how it's going to go. But look for Grossmont maybe to do a couple of things differently. And one last thing I wanted to touch on, they still don't have that running back, that guy that can carry the rock and give them 100 yards per game. And I think that's where it's lacking and causing them to be one-dimensional. And then with having their offensive line banged up, really it's all on Giles' shoulders. And looking at some of the footage from the highlights from last week, Giles didn't have a bad game. He looked like he was trying to win the game somewhat himself. But it can't be a one-man show. These receivers need to run their routes correctly. They need to hold on to the ball. And we got to get somebody that can run that ball, and it can't be Giles. And so with this one, I just think that Steele Canyon has the offense and the defense, just like last week, particularly the defense. And that's why I'm saying if they run Major Givens again, 2-3 touchdowns will get it done. And I think that defense, if they play like they did last week and pressure that offensive line that's already banged up a little bit, I think that unfortunately for the Hillers, I'm going to have to go with Steele Canyon, and I'm going to have to go with Steele by at least 14, unfortunately for the Hillers. But I think the Hillers will I think maybe they'll score a few more, but I think this unfortunately might end their playoff run.
Yeah, 10 points. Obviously, they know they're going to have to score more points than that. Their touchdown last week came from Giles to Roddick. Great combination this season, but they'll probably have to hook up maybe twice and find other solutions. It's funny. I know that you're making that selection maybe based on the offensive line woes. Grossmont ran the ball, one of its best performances of the season. They did rush as a team for over 100 yards, had three backs that carried it, if you include Giles, that all rushed for, I think, I want to say as a team, they rushed for close to 130 to 150 yards. Trying to remember. I'm a little behind schedule after our late night on Friday night, Dave. But anyway, shout out to Mr. Hicks for watching and all the Cougars as well. We saw him and uh, and on senior night last week, right? We saw Brad with his son Logan, and the thing about Steel Canyon, Dave, Major Gibbons, he's only a junior right now. He's certainly still electric. He's probably the top player in the game. So that's what you have. A team that can control the ball. You're right. Grossmont didn't have a woeful time last week, but they had a trouble finding the end zone. They also got a long field goal from Joe Garcia in the game. It said 45 yards. I didn't see it. I didn't see it. I'm going to go back. That's a boom if that's the case. That's what I read. So
Well,
just go ahead, Dave.
well, you remember that's even more impressive because Tyler Haley had what, a 43-yarder, maybe the third game of the season for the Wolfpack. So a 45-yarder, that's quite impressive.
Oh yeah, and in my view in high school, once you get past 40, you start to take note of the distance. So, Dave, this will be the third time that Grossmont has ever met the same opponent in the last game of the season, and then in the first round of the playoffs. I mentioned to you earlier, Valhalla and Helix did it a few years ago, but for Grossmont, this will be the third time this has happened. In 1978, the Foothillers closed the regular season at Mount Mcgill, losing 35-12, but came back to beat Mount Mcgill in a return trip to Spring Valley, 18-17. Then get this: in 1927, Grossmont played Calexico to a scoreless draw. So section officials called for a replay instead of naming them co-champions, and Grossmont won at home 9-0. So that was in 1927. So I don't know if that one counts, but nonetheless, I'm going to have to favor Steel Canyon in this one as well. I'll say that it can be a 10-point margin. We're going to give Garcia a field goal, maybe somewhere in there. So I don't know, maybe somewhere in the 27-17 range. Dave, the thing about Steel Canyon, we know Gibbons is a kind of a workhorse back, even though he's not a workhorse. He's a strong back, but he's not a large back by any stretch. But Steel Canyon, we've thought about where's their passing. Barton did throw an interception last week against the Foothillers, but that was the only miscue the Cougars had against the Foothillers. They were 9 of 10 passing in that game. So all of a sudden, Steel Canyon, and they went with both quarterbacks, Barton and Manzo. Manzo is a dual threat. Statistically, anyway. Barton doesn't seem to run the ball as much, but seems like he's more the thrower, while Manzo can throw, but also can take off running. He had over 50 yards last week against the Foothillers. So at this point, I think we're going to continue to see both quarterbacks on the Steel Canyon side. It looks like Barton is the thrower, and maybe Barton's earlier and Manzo is later, although I think they did switch. I'm not sure of all the switches. Like I said, went with you to the game. I'm a little behind schedule this week, actually, with our content. So hopefully can wrap that up before we get to this weekend. And I apologize to you for that. But yeah, I've got Steel Canyon winning this one. Both teams 3-7. I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, this is an 8-9 game. So you've got to give Grossmont a puncher's chance. And like I said, those two games were so incredible back in 2016, and to think that Steel Canyon needed a block punt returned for a touchdown to win that one at Grossmont. Steel Canyon had already won a playoff game against San Marcos to earn that date with Grossmont. All right.
Well, I also wanted to mention, if and that's the last time I saw the defense play pretty spectacularly. Uh, Ryan Odom was another one that, and they even had a fill in. I want to say Brooks Roberts, I believe it was, um, making quite a few tackles and some sacks. I think that they really need to go out there and play some really tight defense. I think maybe even I don't know, maybe stack the box. I know that then you'd have to play man with their receivers, but I don't see any reason why that their defensive backs and their safeties in that secondary can't keep up with some of those Cougars, in the secondary. So,
Well, that was
you
the
know,
best passing we've seen at all by far, I think, for the Cougars this year. Not
but
efficiently, but yardage wise as well.
but I still think that, and I'm not saying for throughout the whole evening, but I think that maybe they need to get a few guys in there and maybe not even rush just rush maybe 3 or 4 and see what you can do, but and maybe keep a tight end in there, or not a tight end, but just keep them under pressure and enforce some bad throws if you're Grossmont. And I just think that you know, and find some way to get your defensive linemen to match up against those that tough Cougar offensive line that's creating those holes for obviously they've been creating some really good holes for Major Gibbons.
Now, Steel
But
Canyon's won 4 straight in the series, and they lead the all-time series, Dave, 13 to
yeah,
9. So,
yeah, Steel Canyon definitely has it. It's it, it's unfortunate. Grossmont had a real tough schedule this year, but I think the Hillers could come to an end, unfortunately, this week at the hands of the Cougars.
yeah, I won't say order is restored in the Grossmont Hills League. It's just kind of returned to recent form. So, it looks like Helix, Steel Canyon, and then Grossmont and Granite. I think you could still argue that they are kind of even at this point, but right now we're just in the playoffs. So let's continue on, Dave, and talk about those Granite Hills Eagles. This is going to be a
Mm-hmm.
tough assignment, but it's going to be an exciting game, a good game. Dave, last week the Helix Highlanders beat Granite Hills 49-35. It sounds like a close game. It really wasn't, but I just want to highlight something that happened in that game day before we preview this game. An unbelievable sequence of events that really kind of went overlooked by the media. It wasn't talked about at all. I mean, we wrote about it, but I don't know if any of those shows even talk about it, or if you even noticed it, because it's out of context, because out of the game, because you're going to see kickoffs and extra points. But basically, on first down, the team scored touchdowns on the first play from scrimmage for 5 consecutive possessions. Washington ran for a touchdown, extra point, kickoff. Next first down, Granite Hill, after the kickoff, Granite Hills, they run that great play, that pass from Haston to Edmond for a touchdown, right? And then extra point, kickoff, whatever.
Hastings
Helix,
been
next
amazing.
play, Helix gets a touchdown. Okay, the same thing, extra point, kickoff. Next play, Granite Hills, touchdown on first down. Then even again, another kickoff, extra point kickoff. Helix gets a touchdown. 5 consecutive first down plays were touchdowns at the end of the first half. Basically, they scored 5 touchdowns in 70 seconds or 67 seconds, 70 seconds. I can't even remember, but because it happened so fast. And anybody who's there kind of knows what I'm talking about. Maybe they just thought there was a lot of scoring and they're like, wow, this is really wild. But that's got to be some type of modern day record. And I said it on the broadcast. Remember, we were watching the West Hills game and I was looking at the scoring and I was getting text updates. That's probably why my phone was so choppy. I got to turn off the notifications because it kept popping up, people texting with the updates. It was awesome. And I saw that they had scored the 5 consecutive touchdowns. I couldn't believe it. Helix went on to win that game. Christian Washington, another huge night. I'm afraid he might get passed over for the Player of the Year. He's definitely going to be, one of the candidates, and I think in my mind he is the CIF Player of the Year. There's some great candidates out there, but the way he continues to rack up these big time numbers, these big time touchdowns, big moves is my guy. But then to throw
Well,
in all the East County bias, the Helix bias. But
well,
I
you
just
got
had to say it. I haven't said it all year. The regular season's over. Christian Washington, you got my vote.
yeah, but I'll tell you what, he done a great job, but and so is Gibbons. But I'll tell you what, Mr. Savi Oakley is right up there with those gentlemen,
Absolutely.
and I think, boy, they're in all. It's going to be one of the toughest. Which, in case you fans don't know, and it'll be advertised enough, so you gotta know, unless we're under a rock. But KOSI's Silver Pigskin this year is actually going to be at the hosted at the Rock Church in Point Loma, and apparently it's just much more space, and I don't know. I think Paul Rudy liked the whole ambiance of it. It's great on the aircraft carrier, but I think that Paul Rudy really just liked the whole ambiance of it, and you've seen it. Pastor Miles McPherson, former Charger and pastor of the Rock Church, senior pastor of the Rock Church, he's been talking to quite a few teams, as you've seen, I'm sure, as well, before they go into battle and before they play those games, and such a diverse amount of different teams. I think most recently was Mira Mesa, and after losing Tompe or Coach Thompson, and just telling them just all the positive vibes that he was giving them before starting those games. So it ought to be interesting having it in such a different venue this year. But boy, it's going to be a tough choice this year. I mean, just out of the East County alone, there's such some spectacular, just explosive.
Well, look, those guys are both going to be. They're going to both be finalists, in my opinion. And you might be able to draw straws between them. And I'm afraid the East County will get, end up getting shut out of the award. But anyway, Dave, I didn't mean to go. Look, Helix is for next week. Okay, that's the thing about this show. We're not really going to talk about Helix. Granite Hills at Oceanside. Let me tell you, Dave, Oceanside, they're 4-6 also, but they're a pretty balanced team. They do lead. They lean pass, overrun, but they were 6th in the Avocado League. So these two teams played a famous game back in 1974. Oceanside beat Granite Hills 25-14 in the big Class 2A championship game at then San Diego Stadium.
Great.
So, and
Great.
Kellen Cobbs, he's been a good playoff coach, Dave. 7 wins since 2012, since he took over, including 3 road wins.
Well, Kellen's done such a great job with it. Not only the playoffs, but the regular season games too. I mean, ever since he's taken over, Granite Hills has been a contender and really done well in the Hills League. And it was almost like year after year, he was producing quarterbacks that were great, very athletic, great arm, the ability to run as well. And then he's always had that defense. He's always had a stacked defense, great secondary, the big fellas coming off the edge, which he does this year as well. I want to say that the real struggle that he had, though, is and I think some of it could have to do with the offensive line too, but as these younger quarterbacks, and different. They started the season off, with Tomasello and more of a pocket passer, and definitely the build and looks and moved just like a pocket passing quarterback and had the build for it and everything. I figured is I know it was Valhalla, but after the big win, the 62 points over Valhalla early on in the season, I had high hopes. And then later on in the season, after quite a few turnovers, they decided to rotate the quarterbacks and brought in Mr. Sanders. I believe it was when they headed up to Tucson. They decided to work with two of them, and I really. There's been great moments from both quarterbacks, and Sanders has done a little bit better as far as passer rating and being able to read the defense. I still, though, I'm not sold like I was so many years in a row. They had such great and talented quarterbacks, from Jake Siegfried. Justice McComb was, I think, one of the better ones, the most versatile, at least in the last 4 or 5 years at Granite Hills. But yeah, since I started covering these teams, it was Siegfried, and then we also had Chris. Oh, darn it. What was his last name? Yes, Chris Ostrom. Another great quarterback, and won him quite a few games as well. And then, okay, let's transition on to Justice McComb. Oh, we don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Another fantastic quarterback, and it just when you're able to produce a leader, those leaders like that too, I think that also affects the whole team. Not going to say that neither one of these quarterbacks aren't fit to be leaders. I just think that if there were a weak point or a correctable, I don't want to say that they've had their ups and downs, but I think that is a position that's been a little tough on the Eagles this season. And but like I said, Sanders had his moments too. And I want to, because I brought that up, Coach Kellen, he brought up a good point, a couple of good points. Oceanside, Lincoln, and Madison are all very difficult. It's a difficult path to the finals. Any way you look at it, have to try and build on the offensive.
And then
he was talking about you got to try and build on the offensive performance from last week, because they did. They had a great offensive performance last week. It was fantastic. Like you said, some people are probably going to look at, oh, those were trash touchdowns, as they say, or they were later. You know what? They still scored the points, and the offense was still working. And according to Coach Cobbs, he was very proud of how they did offensively. And he says, also, if we put that offense from last week and you combine it with the defense that they played against Steel Canyon, that they really what was his last quote against Steel? They can take down Madison and Oceanside if they play like they did against Steel defensively, and then last week's performance offensively. And what do you think of that? I think that they're very capable of doing that. And this Oceanside team is not the Oceanside team that we've known, for years, that was a powerhouse. One of the big guys up there with Carlsbad and teams to that effect. But yeah. I think
dad's Oceanside, or your dad's Oceanside, but
And I'm not saying that this is one of the better Granite Hills teams. However, I think Kellen's got a good point. You know, if they can run the ball well and get a little more of a balance, not forcing Sanders to throw the ball, and then maybe some bubble screens, little play action, um, and just make sure the defense is causing pressure. They have, I've mentioned it many times, they've got the secondary. They can pick people off. I mean, Joaquin Thomas Jr., he's great on offense. He's great on defense. He's great on kickoff returns, punt returns. Utilize him. Okay. And then as far as the defense, uh, Tanner and Zach, I mean, those big fellas are also, they're not just big, they're also very physical, and they're athletically built for this type of position. So with that being said, I'm actually I was really, it took me a while to really figure this one out, but I think that Granite Hills goes on the road and ekes one out by a field goal and upsets Oceanside.
The Oceanside's an interesting scenario here. I mean, remember 2019 was a great year for Oceanside. In the spring, they didn't win any games. They only played a couple games, maybe 3 or 4 games. I don't remember, but they couldn't avoid the Grossmont Steel Canyon matchup, I guess, right? Uh, because you look at, but I was just interested how Oceanside, and look, they took down the ratings before they made the pairings. I don't even know if they put them back up. I didn't look, but Oceanside, I understand. Look, they're 4-6. They don't have as good a record as Grossmont, but just remember this, Dave. Grossmont, remember, beat El Camino, and El Camino smashed Oceanside 35-6. So I know that head to head, you're not gonna move, one team up 2 spots and whatever. But I don't know. It just seemed weird. But maybe Oceanside's deserving of
So
it.
you're thinking more of maybe they should have played Grossmont or Steele as opposed to.
Right. Could they avoided it with 2 Grossmont? At least one of our teams is going to be in the semifinals. That's a guarantee with that little bracket of the Grossmont Steel Canyon Helix. Granite Hills, obviously, like you said, it'll be tough. Madison's probably, for all the great teams we talk about, Madison's a team that has been the hardest, the fastest rising team late in the season. I mean, they're really looking good right now, moving up the charts as well. So that's going to be a tough game. I've got Oceanside winning this one by a field goal. So we'll be opposite here. And the Eagles have something to prove, and I want them to prove it to me, and I want them to go out and win this game. It will really make their season if Fly Eagle Fly can take this one down, because maybe they've been disappointed because of the way the league season went. They only had the 4 wins. Expectations maybe were higher, and they could feel really good if they could go up there and win this game against Oceanside. It would make their season for sure.
Hey, they did it in Tucson, so why can't they just go up north about 45 minutes to an hour north and do it on the coast?
Yeah, computer rates it close. Computer rates it under a touchdown, so it's anybody's ball game up there. And we know Granite Hills, like I said, Dave Cobbs. I mentioned 3 wins. He's 3-5 on the road in the playoffs. That's not bad. I mean, 3 wins, on the road in the playoffs, and I mentioned 7-7 in the playoffs. So, I think that he's a proven coach when it goes to taking teams on the road in the CIF playoffs, especially in a matchup where, it's a bit of a toss-up, despite Oceanside maybe favoritism for the home field.
You know what, and he's one of the younger coaches too, and I think really, I think so, not so much in the conference, but I think he doesn't get the appreciation that he deserves sometimes. I think he's really done a great job with the program, and not every Granite Hills team had all that had just talent that was just laid out there. So I think, like you said, the records speak for itself, and I think that and all bias aside, I think Granite Hills really has a shot. Is it going to be a close one? Is it going to be a low score? I think it's going to be low scoring too, because I
You
think
do, huh?
those defenses, I think, are going to go at it, and they're
Okay.
going to try and get after those quarterbacks. So uh, look for a low scoring game too. But again, I'm going to take my Eagles on the road, and he's going to be 8-7 and 4-5 on the road. So I'll give it to Kellen and crew.
The computer definitely says a high scoring game, and I kind of tend to agree with you. The computer says like almost like over 50, like almost 60 points, but I was really thinking somewhere around 50 points. Sounds like you think it may even be less than that.
Yeah, I just
Now,
I
Tomasello hooked up with Josh Zander in that sequence. When I was talking about the 5 touchdowns, I mentioned Tomasello threw a screen pass to Haston. Haston threw a long bomb to Edmond, and then Helix scored with Washington. And then the next play was next play from scrimmage, a 73-yard connection between Tomasello and Zander. And that's when the game was still in the balance.
let me tell you, I think Haston is a underrated player that's on that field for Grossmont. Another one that came over from Helix. I think he is a lot more talented than people give him credit for. Also, would he be put into that up for the pigskin? There's so much talent. No, because of, and I really think it's because he hasn't had as many opportunities to show his talent, and that is the reason.
Okay. So you have him being an elite player he's a junior, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So
Okay.
I think he's only going to get better. He just needs to
He's had some spectacular plays, but he's really just only come on of late. I mean, and his plays have been spectacular, but nothing off the charts like you're suggesting. I appreciate the potential though.
He can throw the ball. I saw some things, even if you watch the Grossmont game that they lost in. Boy, he was making some spectacular catches there. He's able to the yards after the catch. He's great with that also. You talk to Coach Carps too, and I guarantee he's going to tell you he's one of the at least in the top 5 players that he has on the squad. So don't be surprised if you don't see some good statistics.
He's a sophomore, so and he's
already making some noise.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. But it caught me by surprise when you were comparing him to elite players such as Savion Yokley and Christian Washington, because I have not seen that yet. I think he has the potential to be a spectacular and a big time star, but I have not seen enough this season to warrant him consideration as a county player of the year candidate.
I think if things were changed around, and again, I don't want to attack the quarterbacks because they've done some amazing things as well. But look, just hypothetically speaking, if he did have a justice throwing to him, I think he would be targeted a lot more times. And I think the touchdowns, I think he would score a lot more often. I think the yardage would go up and the receptions. I just think it would be more noticeable. But hey, you can't have a perfect team every year. And don't get me wrong, Nico, you've done a great job. Mr. Sanders, you've done a great job. But this one right here is going to be the biggest test for you gentlemen. And it's going to be vital that we, especially, again, Granite Hills has to not turn the ball over. No freebies.
One of the problems Granite Hills has moving forward with awards is that they do not have complete statistics available for voters to refer to. But we've done a pretty good job documenting their season, obviously, on East County Sports. Okay, Dave, let's move on now and take a look at Division II, where we have one team, and it's our team, and we're going to have to take the good and the bad here. We'll talk about an exciting matchup with Christian and San Diego. It's a 9 versus an 8. Christian, Dave, had a rough time with Point Loma. We were touting it as kind of the meeting of the minds between Joel Allen and Dan Mitchell, the best buddies, you know, coaching against one another. But Joel Allen, don't forget, one of the really all-time winningest coaches in county history, winning percentage-wise, and he has a lot of wins as well. I think over 100 victories. But Joel got the best of his buddy in that one, and how'd they do it? They ran all over the Patriots, Dave. Wow. The Point Loma, they were 0 for 6 in the passing department. They might as well not thrown at all because they rushed big time. Big running, over 300 yards, 350. What was it, Dave? Point Loma smashed Christian 35-6, I believe it was.
Yeah, I remember the first quote from Coach Mitchell was, I mean, that was his basic text, and I think he didn't even want to go further than that. He said, "We plain just got our tails kicked. We went out there and they had their number." One of those games, I didn't think that. I mean, I knew that they were good, and I trusted that it was going to be quite a ball game, but I just didn't. I didn't expect Christian's defense to give up that many points. That's really where I struggle to understand. And on the other side too, only 6. I just don't. That's not something we've seen all season long. And they beat some good teams, and they even competed more with Scripps Ranch. They didn't score that less of points. So yeah, it's. I think that this season it's almost Christian's hard to predict.
They're almost having trouble balancing their offense, aren't they? They really have a nice passing, and Jake Davila can run it out, and he's a dual threat quarterback. But have they really gotten anything together from the line of scrimmage as far as a run game is concerned, Dave? And look, as far as this matchup against the Cave, I mean, how can Christian win this game? The Cavers are extremely run heavy. I mean, they run all the time, more than more than almost any other team in the county, other than Sweetwater. I mean, San Diego is like a 3 or 4 to 1 run to pass ratio, so that doesn't bode well for Christian. There's a sidebar in the story. Coach James in his last year, he's leaving San Diego High, so they're supposedly have motivation, but they're 8-2 and they're an 8 seed in Division II.
Let's not forget, I don't have all that info in front of me, but they just played them in the spring. Christian did, and the Cavers did exactly what you're saying. They just ran the ball, and they ran it all over the defense. And I remember even the quotes from Coach Mitchell from the spring, and he said, "My hat's off to these athletes, especially the backs. They were just, when they carried that rock, they were not only quick and fast, but they were, I mean, just the strong kids, the endurance, and then on the other side too, the defense coming after them. He said it was just a very well coached squad, and just full of athletes, and the running backs were just crazy good, like just insane. So, oh boy, I really. I don't like them matched. I don't like seeing them having to play the Cavers again, just based on what they look like in the spring. And in the spring, they hadn't played as many games. As a matter of fact, as I recall, they might have even only played one game. No, they didn't play any games until they met with Christian. So Christian really didn't have anything to go off of, if I recall correctly. And so after they played Christian, boy, San Diego was just incredible.
Yeah, that score was San Diego's first game, and San Diego only played 3 games. They went 1-2. The final score of that game was San Diego. You said that it was a rough night, but actually you're right about the stats, but it was 20-18. So Christian definitely was competitive in that game, Dave.
But I think that's what I recall most. And it was the rushing attack was just I don't know the exact stats, but it had to be crazy amounts of just picking up chunks of yardage, and that's mostly what they did. If I recall correctly, there wasn't that many passes thrown as in comparison, um, but I do remember that coach saying that we were physically at the end of that game too, just worn out. They really had to play them hard. So, with that being said, I don't even think it's going to come down to Christian's offense having to play as well as I think the defense really has to come in and figure a way. I didn't get a hold of Coach Mitchell. I sent him a text out. I'm sure he was busy with the game plan and maybe even extra practice. But at any rate, I think that he really needs to go out and that defense has to be stellar. And I think they need to really focus on stopping that run and then taking their chances on the pass, because look what happened last time. Could be a duplicate, and as you see the stats right now, they love to run the ball, very run heavy, and they've been successful. So I'm sure, hey, Pat Kelly, I'm sure he's putting together probably one of the best defensive plans right now. And I will say, just watching him in action the few times I have, he is really something else, and he is locked in, and he's very aware of what kind of offensive plays are being called on the field and getting it changed up with his guys. So maybe we will see a close game again, but I'd just like to see them limit the Cavers on the ground and force them to throw the ball. Because I think maybe the reason they're doing all the running is maybe their passing game isn't all that great. So the defense has got to do it. And I think one of the biggest leaders and plays everywhere, I think Joey Merritt needs to lead his defense as he has, and he has to lead in tackles. But I think Joey Merritt and crew really need to they need to just buckle in and just go after them, and don't let them create those holes. Knock that offensive line off balance and stuff those holes, and then let the offense do their thing. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe Christian needs to do a little more rushing themselves.
Well, David, we'll tell you one thing that did happen in the game in the spring is that Jake Davila threw a touchdown pass to J.C. Gustin in the game. So even though it was 20-18, those two guys did hook up. Even though Gabe Krug was the starting quarterback in that game, they did have Davila play in that game. In fact, I think Krug was hurt because if you remember, Will Carlock ended up taking most of the snaps from quarterback in that game. So I don't know if that's the game where Krug had hurt his back, but Davila eventually came into the game and threw a touchdown pass to Gustin in that game. So look, I'm not calling it a doomsday scenario. I'm just saying that Point Loma was incredible. Christian admitted it, that they struggled with the run, right? Point Loma ran right through them. They didn't even complete a pass. And here you have a San Diego team that really achieves all of their success on the run. But I don't think they're quite in the Point Loma category. as far as the overall ability of the team. So that's why I think the game will be close. I have San Diego edging out Christian in this one based on that fact and the home field advantage, and I'll take San Diego Cavers by a score, maybe by 3. Winner plays Mira Mesa. You mentioned Mira Mesa. The winner of this game does play at Mira Mesa. So maybe the Patriots, if they could win, would finally get a shot to play the Mira Mesa Marauders.
Well, I know if I know Coach Mitchell, they are definitely not looking past this one. He wants to get this one done before even thinking of Mira Mesa. However, there can't be any mistakes. They have to play mistake-free football, and I think they need to do a little running in the themselves. But I think they have offensively. I think they have enough weapons. I mean, they got the quarterback. They got Gustin. They got Province.
All those guys played in that spring game. I'll tell you that.
And look, they're more seasoned now. They played some great, talented teams. Look what they did with St. Margaret's. I mean, they played some great teams. So it is doable. I think they're a better team than they were last in the spring when they played the Cavers. So with that being said, because of the success they've had on the ground, I'm hoping that Christian has shored up and figured out how to stop that run. And because the same thing happened last week, I'm hoping that they've corrected that. But I'm going to go with the Cavers, and I'm going to go with the Cavers by a point, mainly being that they are at home and that they've been so successful with the run. So, Coach Mitchell, Coach Kelly, let's take care of that line. Let's not let them get through. And while we're at it, why don't we get them to turn it over, maybe a strip sack or something, so Christian can move on and do their thing. But
yeah, I've been wrong. I mean, to be selfish about our picks every week, Dave, I've done pretty bad. I picked Christian a lot, and they've not come through for me as far as just our picks. So I know if they're not coming through for me, they're not coming through for themselves, right? So I'm backing off them now, and then maybe that's not saying that's the motivation, but I'm just saying that they have to prove it to us right now, and they can. They definitely can.
And let's keep in mind they did keep, as I mentioned before, they kept up with Scripps Ranch. Scripps Ranch is one of the best teams in San Diego County right now, and they kept right up with them. They did lose, yes, they did, but they played a darn good game against them. They beat St. Margaret up at their place in Orange County. So let's look at that. Yeah, La Jolla, that wasn't that was a little bit of a mess, but they've beaten some of these good teams, and they've come close and really battled with some of these teams. Santa Fe Christian's one of the better ones too. So it's not like they played a bunch of patsies. Their losses were not against anybody that was below 500 or any team that isn't going to go far in the playoffs. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and that was a big loss last week. It probably cost them this. Might have cost them playing at home. I don't know, but they'll have to prove it. Last time Christian leads the all-time series, Dave, 8-3-1. But the last time that Christian won at Balboa Stadium, or now it's Broderick Field, but 1988. So you're gonna have to break that little bit of a drought. There hasn't been a lot of meetings. They've only met twice this century. Most of the meetings were back before the turn of the century, but still, you got to go back to 88. Last time Christian won in that historic venue.
Jake,
all right, Dave, go ahead.
Jake, Joey, Coach Mitchell, Coach Kelly, hey, there's your motivation. You need to get out there and you need to get it handled, because unfortunately we're having to pick against you with those Cavers. And
your dad would have picked against him this week.
Oh yeah, well he likes to stir it up a little bit too to give them the motivation too.
That's
So
right. Okay.
there's a method to the madness.
All
But
right.
moving
And
on,
no, we're out of time. Good night, everybody.
yeah,
The
you want to
West
get
Hills
you want to get
Wolfpack.
phone
Shout out
calls?
to all of our friends sticking around. We're going to be here till midnight if we keep this up, Dave. But hats off to all of our friends watching the Wolfpack in their game, getting ready for this one, Dave, against Bonita Vista. I don't know how much more we can talk about last week's game. We didn't mention everybody maybe that we wanted to that had great games for the Wolfpack, but now would be a good time to start.
Well, let's also. I want to put in Coach Ash and what he had to say regarding last week a little bit and Bonita Vista. It says Bonita Vista looks good. The only games that they have lost to excellent teams. They have a huge line and talented skill players. Uh, the reason he answered with this is I mentioned that Dylan Diego, they were kind of the unsung heroes. I know that most of
You know what,
those.
Dylan Snyder or Dylan Freund? Or
I'm
both, but
talking
I
about
mean,
I'm sorry. I'm talking about Colin Dill, and I'm talking
oh,
about
Colin Dill. Yes. Oh, yeah. Colin
and
Dill and
Diego
Diego Calderon. And
and
in a funny, Dave, I'll let you continue. But I mentioned Austin Dill. I mean, you mentioned how fast Colin Dill is, but Austin Dill, who I mistakenly said that when he scored that first touchdown because out of old habit, right? But Austin Dill was a pretty fast guy too. But Colin Dill, man, what a performance! And Diego Calderon. Go ahead, Dave.
anyway, he was saying that they have been great. Uh, but as he was saying, and this is true, and I after looking it up, it's absolutely true to a T. And if you look up their stats too, he said I don't think we have really broken them out yet, per se. Diego hasn't touched the ball more than 8 times in a game yet. So think about that. He has not touched it more than 8 times. If that's only if he's averaging 8 times or less, boy, is he really putting the pedal to the metal, and he's making the most of each opportunity he has when he gets out on the field. Also, as we'd already talked about, and Coach talks about as well, is how well Max Conaway did. He says here that Max did a great job on both sides in that last game. Probably, not probably, but he says had his best blocking game of the year. And when you were rushing for over 300 yards, you were not going to bother throwing it to your wide receiver much. Just and then his last statement was just awesome, awesome awesome night last week. I mean that pretty much sums it up as far as excuse me the Wolfpack and Dylan Snyder, Dylan Friend, Trevor and Bimbo, as I just mentioned, Colin Dill and Diego, and I know we'll miss some Max Conaway doing his thing. And let's not forget about the gunslinger himself. What about Braden Oberg? Not even having to not
Who
having to just
now? Oh man,
not just
Braden.
having to not just
Austin.
throwing, but being able to run up the gut, picking up short yardage, picking up long yardage, uh, running around to the left, to the right. I mean, this guy, and if you look at him at the end of the game, he was in great spirits. Now, if you recall, though, I believe it was uh, towards the end of the game, though, he was limping just a smidge,
Yeah.
and it didn't look like as you mentioned too. You saw him because you were on there.
Yeah, I thought he turned his ankle. He definitely got his ankle taped up after that hard tackle just short of the goal line. He
But
didn't come out of the game. Or I think he would almost had to come out of the game, but he did not. But I
it's
think I would think he will be fine. It's gonna have that taped. I don't think he could. I don't think he would be at 100% speed if he had to sprint. It looked like it bother him a little bit, but you know, given the playoff energy, you're not. I expect him to be ready.
No, I think he's I think that Braden's getting ready because you know what? Your senior year, you've had the perfect season now. You've achieved that. You achieved getting both of the trophies that you wanted to get, the record, winning the league. I mean, after talking to him last week, his I think he might have even added in a number. I think it was 12 wins he'd like to have at least this season. So uh, he definitely has. He definitely the sky's the limit for that kid, and really a brilliant kid too. I think he's a very smart football player on that field at reading defenses and not turning the ball over very often. And you know he had a little trouble against Santana, but I think he, I think this is what's going to be the biggest key for and how West Hills will be one of the better teams is because they don't turn the ball over very often.
Well, I've got West Hills right now on a school record 12-game winning streak. I know the paper said 11-game winning streak, but I mean we're 10-0, and they won the last 2 games of spring, right? So I think I've got them right now on a 12-game winning streak. Dave, the Barons, they were 4th in the Mesa League. They run at nearly a 2-to-1 clip, but they don't have a dominant back. They spread the carries around in the backfield, but I think they're primarily known as a rushing team. I think that's going to play easily into the Wolfpack's hands. Interestingly, Dave, these two teams have only met twice in the history, and they both were playoff games. In 2016, just 5 years ago, final score 27-10, Bonita Vista. That was at West Hills. Back in 1998 at West Hills, it was 39-14 West Hills. Now, West Hills 4-8 in the playoffs in the last decade, 7-16 this century. That's not great. The Barons, they had that big run in 2015, but prior to that, Bonita Vista has maybe the worst playoff history of any team in the section. Prior to 2014, they were 3-24 all time in the playoffs. Before that state run, they won the Southern California regional title in 2015 and lost to the Hanford Bullpups, where Chuck Cecil started his career before going to Helix. But anyway, Dave, that I just think that shows that West Hills is in a good position as a number 5 seed. Again, I think they're overrated by the pollsters at number 12. Their rating, on most of the computers have them, closer to the, 20 or 25 teams. But nonetheless, I've got West Hills winning this game. The winner plays at Ramona. Be a neat drive up there. Take the 67, head to Ramona. I've got West Hills winning this one by at least a couple of touchdowns.
Yeah, and the little bit that I looked
Okay,
in
two. Yeah.
on Bonita Vista too, I hands down that this is definitely going to play into West Hills defense's hands for sure. They're great on the run, against the run, I should say. So, hey, I wouldn't even be surprised if they're already working with the defense about punching the ball out of the ball carrier's hand and trying to get a couple of scooping scores and really get it started right away on a turnover. So don't be surprised if you see that. I disagree with you. I disagree with anybody thinking that West Hills is more of a number 25. That's ridiculous. If I had to rate them, maybe 12 is a little high, but at least a number 15 or so, as far as I'm concerned. But at any rate, I'm going to say West Hills over Bonita on their home field by 3 touchdowns. No, not by 7, folks, by 21.
I think that might be fine too. I think I mentioned the 4 victories for Bonita Vista. I think, and I'm you mentioned, maybe it was Ash's quote that they beat some tough teams. Is that what he said? He said
Yeah.
they played some tough teams. He might be thinking that, and the teams that they did beat are historically better teams, but I think they had a combined, if you took the teams that they beat, the 4 teams, a combined record of like 6-28 or something like that, or 4-28, 4-24, 6-24, something like that. They were very, very bad record wise. I got West Hills. I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to tack on another touchdown. Wolfpack by 3 scores, and be a great game. The Wolfpack and Ramona. But let's talk. We could talk about it. West Hills, don't get ahead of yourself. Take care of business. But really be interested in seeing that game as West Hills. How deep can they go? Like I said, Dave, you want to take West Hills as an underdog now in the Division III tournament. Like, they're favored to win this game big time. But going up as you climb the ladder in this Division III, where so many quality teams are, it's going to be great to see how far this team can go. And even if they run in and can't get it done, they might have a great, thrilling game on the road somewhere that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. So, all right, we've got the Wolfpack. We've talked about them enough. Remember, Dave, before the show, we had to talk about Dave Hunter. That was great.
Dave the Rave.
Oh, what a guy he was. Okay. Dave, Orange Glen and El Capitan. El Capitan, of course, they're going to the playoffs. I mean, come on. We know what happened last week. And look, I contend they played very, very well. I think they ran into a little bit of a mini juggernaut, right? Against West Hills, considering their season. But El Capitan, very, very good effort. Orange Glen, 3rd in the Coastal League. They beat La Jolla Country Day, but lost to Chula Vista. So they are a big-time passing team, Dave. Nearly 2-to-1 passing ratio. But the quarterback for Orange Glen, 15 interceptions this season. They do have 2 receivers that both have double-digit touchdown receptions. So I think that El Capitan has the guys to cover those Orange Glen receivers.
Exactly. I was going to say that with those interceptions in double digits and the amount of throws that they're going to put up there, I think the Vaqueros are in capable hands in that secondary. And don't be surprised if you see a couple of them go to the house. It's very possible. And then I think overall, too, I think after a game and a heartbreaker like they had against West Hills, I think that's also going to be more fuel to go out there and really just a lesser team just go out there and just get started early and just kind of blow it out early. Get started early, score early. Don't be surprised if there's a little, Yoakley to Yoakley, and I'm referring to Sabi to Antoine, and I think that possibly, even though it is a playoff game, I do think that there's always a possibility to see Newland go out there behind center and get to throw maybe a long pass or even a play action to Sabi, and then let Sabi do the rest, because you know that as soon as he gets the ball, all bets are off, and he's gonna make people miss. And let's not forget about the other playmakers, Xavier Peace. We also got Alex back, and defensively we're beefed up again. So in reality, I think they're going to take out some frustrations on this Orange Glen team. And I don't mean just defensively. I think offensively too. And I think they'll be able to pick apart this Orange Glen defense. Let's look for El Capitan with a big rebound and moving on in the playoffs, CIF playoffs. And I'm going to take El Capitan by 3 touchdowns as well.
All right, don't forget, Peace had a touchdown last week. Julian May scored that touchdown, Dave, remember? The 19-yarder with under 2 minutes to go. So it was great to see May reach the end zone once again. So I think El Capitan can return to form here in this one. Dave, I know Coach Berner knows this, and I don't know if it's something he'd even share with his team or not, but I guarantee a lot of people don't know. But ever since that 2014 season, El Capitan has not won a playoff game. So a little bit of pressure, I think, maybe felt by the coaching staff a little bit to make sure they get this win. As a considerable favorite. I mean, I definitely think that El Cap is a 3-touchdown favorite or so, and I think that they might be able to get that margin. They just, for some reason, they let teams stay in the games or get some scores early, and they kind of make it difficult on themselves. And I wouldn't necessarily say that kind of wasn't the same form as the game took last Friday night. Remember, the way the teams traded the score, and then finally when the defense is settled in, it was a turnover that kind of stopped things going for both teams. So interestingly, Dave, Orange Glen and El Capitan have never met on the football field. So I don't have any series history for you on this one. I can't tell you Orange Glen did once play at El Capitan, but that was playing Santana, and that was in 1968. So I don't have anything for you on that, but I've got El Capitan. I'll say by 2 touchdowns, so they'll win by more, but I think they're favored by 3 touchdowns by the computers.
I can't believe I'm agreeing with those darn computers, but I guess I'll take it on this one.
Speaking of the Santana Sultans, Dave, a 7-2 season for the Sultans. Another great year. It just points to the steadiness of that coaching staff, despite the turnover. Talk about player turnover, injuries that keep creeping up, especially at the quarterback position. They still find a way to get it done, to earn that home game that we said they would. And now they're playing a team that, Imperial and Santana have a pretty long history, not recently. So none of these players, not even these coaches necessarily. Yeah, they were playing back. These coaches got together. I'll tell you the series history in a little bit, but this is not going to be an easy game by any stretch. I mean, Santana maybe is a favorite because of the home field against the Tigers. Remember, Imperial played West Hills at the beginning of the year, but that was West Hills. What say you, Dave?
Well, you got to remember they went and West Hills, coming off that huge decimation of the Comets. We're going into that game against Imperial. I don't think they were going in there with a big head though, because Coach Ash, he's played a lot of those desert teams, including Southwest El Centro. They kind of trade off, but he likes to get those desert teams in there. But let's not forget, as a matter of fact, I was at the Santana was playing Montgomery, a team that they didn't really know about because I think it was a second week, and Santana was doing pretty well against Montgomery. And checking on the scores, it was 7-0 Imperial for the most part until the second half. So their defense held off West Hills offense very well to start the game. But then, and I remember talking to Coach Ash too about his offensive line, his special teams, his defense. I mean, the defense for the most part played okay, but he said offensively and the special team just horrendous. And it was a tale of 2 halves. and it looked like Imperial might do something, but then, boy, I think it was Max. I want to say a 65-yard touchdown, or maybe it was even it might have even been one of the defenders. Uh, I I can't remember, but
Well, the
anyhow, it
final
was.
score was 21-7. If that jars your memory at all.
Yeah, and it ended up being they were dominating the game at the end, and Max was involved in a lot of those plays. I remember they even called a beautiful touchdown. He went diagonally from sideline to sideline, uh, and it was called back because of holding. They did connect again. Braden and him connected again. It just wasn't as pretty. But that was also a night that Tyler Haley unfortunately missed an extra point, and also missed I believe it was a 37-yard field goal. Uh, but I think that.
That was 7-0 at halftime. Imperial.
Yeah, but I then they came out, and for the most part West Hills came out and figured it out, and that was pretty much what I remember asking coach. Hey, coach, you did a great job out there. He said, not really. He said, we won, but we have a lot of things to fix and a lot of things to tighten up.
Yeah,
So
Conway had 2 touchdowns, and the other big play was Cohen Benavente had that pick 6.
that was
So
what I was
I
talking about,
think
the
that
65
I
yard.
don't know if West Hills and Santana need to share any secrets necessarily about this. I mean, the Tigers run more than they pass, but they have just 6 passing touchdowns this season. Now they have rushed for 18 touchdowns. So how do you think Santana's defense will do against that type of
I,
offense?
I think they'll do just fine, because I think that, look, Santana was one of the few, or I should say the only, that was getting that got more pressure on Braden, and Braden said it himself in the interview after the game, after that Santana game, that he had not been pressured as much by any team the whole season, with the exception of Santana. Santana really kept him on his toes, and he was throwing before he wanted to throw it a lot of times, getting flushed out of the pocket real quickly. I mean, they were just coming in there so quickly. Same thing with trying to run the ball. So with that being said, I think Santana, look,
Where they
if,
the quarterback situation concerns me, Dave. I mean,
Al,
it sounds like Alex Rico, but they could go maybe if it's not working, then they could revert to Hughes. Hughes has definitely gotten the team through a jam before, but
you mean
Rico
Ethan
is
Wright?
a guy who could be the future quarterback, and he's been in there the last couple of games since the JV season ended, and without Ledger coming back this year because of that injury.
Are you talking about Ethan Wright?
Yes, Ethan Wright.
Yes. So
He's
no,
the Nathan Hughes of today, right?
correct. But
Keep doing that.
Alex Rico, this is according to Coach Estes. Alex Rico will start,
Okay.
and we might use Nash in a limited role as far as rushing. He's referring to, which I think is a big deal as far as offense goes. Uh, he says our defense will have to play well, create some turnovers, because they are um, because they're a great football team. Offense, we absolutely cannot make any mistakes like we have this year. So I'm sure he's saying that giving Imperial any turnovers, any freebies, that's something he definitely don't want to do. I can agree with that too, but I think the key here, I don't even think that I don't think that Santana has to put up so many points. I think they need to just take care of the ball. I think they can, some underneath stuff, run with Brashears, run with Nash. Like you said, limited capacity, just to balance it out so they're not looking for the pass, because that's what they're going to be looking for in particular. That way, maybe possibly limit the turnovers on their side of the ball offensively. But I think that the defense is going to be the key, and the way that their defense has been playing all season long, and why they only have the 2 losses, is because they've been playing so great.
Well, David Friedman had that 35-yard interception return right at the beginning of the game to set the tone against the Braves, who did a pretty good job. But also, Dave, you mentioned Brashears, but also Lyndon Benson. He
Yes.
scored a touchdown in that game, and looks like he's carrying the ball. He scored the second touchdown for the Sultans, and then he scored the third touchdown on a 4th and goal. So look for sophomore Lyndon Benson moving forward. Looks like he's going to be a promising player. I think he even had 3 touchdowns in the game.
Right.
Four. Lyndon Benson. I mean, how can I pass this up? He scored 4 touchdowns in that game. It's right here in my notes.
Yeah, and
sorry, Lyndon, you deserve better. We're gonna need you.
And who was it? Is it Friedman too? Let's not forget about.
He had 2 picks, and Gonzalez also had a pick. So
yeah, Jason Gonzalez.
Tigers,
so they have the playmakers that are going to create the turnovers. So I think because they have the defense, Santana easily at their place. I say they win this one by at least 2 touchdowns, maybe more.
Wow. I've got the Sultans winning this one. I've got the Sultans winning this one by just a couple of points. I think it's going to be a very close game. Remember, Imperial beat Monte Vista 31-0, Dave.
Yeah.
Doesn't do anything for you?
That's how well I think of this Santana defense, though. They've been phenomenal. So I think that they do their job, and they create some of these, get some picks, maybe some strip sacks, and then just play just some safe plays on offense, and I think they'll be good to go.
Well, Dave, these 2 teams, I mentioned them played quite a bit. From 2007 to 2013, these teams played quite a bit. In fact, they met in the playoffs twice. Imperial won in 2010. Santana won in 2012. All time, the series is 6-2-1 in favor of the Sultans. Imperial pretty good in the playoffs. 8-7 this decade, 12-14 this century. So I've got this one a close game, just because the Sultans, they're making do at quarterback, and not to say that Rico isn't the quarterback of the future coming up the JV. It's tough to come in late in the season, and now you're playing a playoff game, and that's why I said maybe if they needed the stability, they could go with Wright. They have other guys, but that looks like what you've said and the way they're heading. So I've just got this one being a close game, and do want Santana to win that ball game, of course, against Imperial. And that might be one of the best games. Some of these games might be a little lopsided, some of them close, but this one I think is going to be close. You got it a blowout, and I hope you're right. I wouldn't want to sweat this one out. All right, Dave, let's move on. A 2-hour show, but it's the playoffs. Who cares at this point? Mount Mcgill, this is Division 4. They're going to take on La Jolla Country Day. Talk about a good game that could be close. This one sounds like it could go right down to the wire. La Jolla Country Day, 4th in the Coastal League. They did lose to that Orange Glen club this season. Orange Glen, talked about OCAP's chances. Orange Glen, not great. They're not a great team, so that was a bad loss for La Jolla Country Day, who is the higher seed here. Dave, La Jolla Country Day, one of the fastest paced teams in the county. They've run nearly 600 plays this season. They pass about 60% of the time. Their quarterback has 32 touchdown passes.
Wow. Well, I don't know. I think Mount Mcgill has made a believer of me just because they were. I think what did it for me is the 35-28 game against El Cap, in which El Cap won, but for them to score 28 points against that defense, that really opened my eyes. And I mean, beating Crawford, yeah, that's great and fine and dandy. But the biggest game that they won, I think, of the season was, or not won, but even though it ended up in a loss, I think that Mount Mcgill did a heck of a job playing that El Capitan team.
Yeah, I agree. I think with Mount McGill, look, this is going to be, I think, a crazy game. This is the first time these two teams have ever met. Mount McGill does not have a great playoff history right now. They're just 2-7 in the playoffs this decade, but they're going to have the big time running game, right, with their nice three backs that are really getting it done right now, including Hernandez and McGowan.
Eric White.
And White, right. But here's the thing about La Jolla Country Day. You remember some of these games that they played? They played some crazy games. They don't play. They have that high tempo and they don't play much defense at all. Back in 2019, before the spring season, the last season, right? They gave up 38 points to Tri-City Christian in a win. They gave up 29 points to Montgomery. They won. They lost. They gave up to 76 points to Sarah. And then remember in 2018, that incredible game, they lost to Santana 76-55. They gave up 76 points to Santana. So basically in their last 4 playoff games, they're allowing 54 points a game. So Mount Mcgill, they can run all over them, I would think, here. I think Mount Mcgill can rush they'll own them all. They'll own their possession. La Jolla Country, it's a big time contrast of styles. So I don't know how that's going to work out, other than Mount Mcgill might not be in the field that long as well, because they might run all over La Jolla Country Day and just keep trading points. So I don't know if it's going to be one of those crazy 100-point games, but it might be. The computers have it, kind of around 55 to 60 points, I think. But I have a feeling it's going to be more points than that. I think it's going to be the craziest score of the night. And
I think it's going to be, I think Mount Mcgill is going to handle it. But I'm going to say the chances of that many points being scored are just as good a chance as Philip Rivers suiting up and going to start behind center for the Saints. So
isn't that going to be, that's going to happen, right? I mean,
I didn't see anything official on it.
Is his high school season over, or I don't know. Anyways, I'll take the Matadors. I'll take them by a point. I think they can win. The computer has this one. I think they have Matadors by 1. Another independent computer has them by a touchdown, so I think they can win. The winner is going to play. I'll have to find it out. Got me. Help me out. Help me out.
My score on this one is I'm actually gonna take Mount Mcgill by a field goal, 30-27.
Okay. So we both got Mount Mcgill on that one. I'm just calling up the D4 bracket because I hate to not have them. I've ruined the whole show, Dave. You had a great show. Patrick Henry, of course. Patrick Henry. I mean, you think about that. Talk about crazy if either team.
The Spring Valley.
We saw Matadors play Patrick Henry already. Patrick Henry, they took care of him pretty good.
The Spring Valley, they own the Spring Valley.
Right. But if La Jolla Country Day played him too, not that we want Mount Mcgill to lose. We're picking Mount Mcgill to go get it done. But La Jolla Country Day, Patrick Henry would be pretty wild as well. So, all right, go Matadors. Let's continue on then, Dave, and one more in Division 4. Hey, the Valhalla Norsemen, they're going to take on the Sweetwater Red Devils. The Red Devils, the champions of the South Bay League, went undefeated in their league. But remember, Dave, they lost that opener to Grossmont. They also lost to Santana at home at Sweetwater, 28-21. Now, making fun of these teams that don't pass. How about Sweetwater? They passed 17 times this season. First
Sounds
ever
like
meeting between these two.
Sounds like another Monta Vista 2.0 over there. But looking at the record and looking at it being at Sweetwater, and who Sweetwater has played as opposed to Valhalla, and the Valhalla wins that they got. They beat Hilltop, they beat the Cajon Valley Braves, and they beat the winless Monta Vista Monarchs. So,
Yeah.
do I have a whole lot of faith in because they beat those teams? No, I think Sweetwater played a tougher schedule, and they're at home. Like to say I got a little more faith in Valhalla, but in this game, I think I'm going to have to. I don't know what the computers say or the coaches say, but I'm going to say that Sweetwater has this one by at least 10 points.
Yeah, the computers have Sweetwater winning this one by really as many as 3 touchdowns. It looks like one computer says maybe 2 touchdowns. Valhalla, hey, they did a great job in that game against Monta Vista. They had that fumble recovery for a touchdown. Alejandro Rosales, 87 yards. And the defense posted a shutout in the second half against the Monarchs. Of course, Monarchs played a tough game early. Monarchs have missed the playoffs, but Valhalla probably clinched the playoffs with that win because they might have been knocked out if they would have lost. Tommy Logan and AJ Cornthwaite, they connected again. We've talked about them all year. They connected on a 78-yarder this time. So Sweetwater's got to be on the lookout for that. I mean, we know Sweetwater can own the time of possession with their ground game the way they do. Logan have passed for 3 touchdowns. So Valhalla's definitely playing their best ball. This is not an uncommon spot. Some of the commentators I've heard trying to look for places to pick upsets. This kind of looks like one in a way, other than the fact that the computers kind of have it so one-sided. But to me, I think Valhalla stays in there as well. I worry because Aiden Roby, look, I'm sorry the Monarchs did not win a game this year. I really wanted them to win that game against Valhalla just because I wanted every team to get a win. But Roby did run all over Valhalla. I mean, he had well over 200 yards. Jaden Richardson said he was getting 6 and 7 yards a carry against them. So Sweetwater should have their rushing advantage against them here. The winner is going to take on Sweetwater in this one. I've got Valhalla playing better. I think Sweetwater wins this one, and I've got Sweetwater winning by a touchdown.
Yeah, I mean, they're a running team. I'm giving Valhalla the benefit of the doubt, but I'm still taking Sweetwater because they're playing at home, and also because look, they're if Monta Vista was able to run all over Valhalla. They got a couple of runners also that I got to see play against Grossmont early on in the season, and so Sweetwater should be able to take care of business.
Yeah, like I said, it's the first ever meeting between these two. The last Valhalla playoff win came back in 2015 against the Christian Patriots, and Valhalla has not won a road playoff game since 2012. And a lot of people will remember this one. It was such a crazy game. It would take too long to explain to you what happened. Valhalla beat La Costa Canyon in a memorable game, 34-33. But it'll be in the preview column this week. What happened there? The Sweeties haven't had to. I still call them the Sweeties now. I'll never get off that. But they haven't won a playoff game either since 2013. So,
Wow.
yeah. And in fact, that was the year I believe they ended up playing I want to say it was Monte Vista, but I'm not sure. All right, let's move on. El Cajon Valley is going to be taking on Army-Navy Academy. Congratulations to the Braves and their playoff berth, as they will take on a pretty tough team here. But they are a 10 seed facing a 7 seed. You got to consider the Braves are definitely a live underdog here. The winner is going to play Mission Bay, Dave. The Warriors, they run the ball at about a 3-to-1 ratio, and they have two pretty good backs who can both find the end zone. I think one has 8 touchdowns. The other might have 9 touchdowns. And Army-Navy Academy was second in the Pacific League. You might remember they beat Foothills Christian twice this year. This is the first time these two teams have ever met.
Well, I also remember that a couple years back, not too far back, the Red Hawks were able to more than handle Army-Navy in the playoffs a few years back too. I wanted to also give you some thoughts. Hopefully the audio will transfer over to you. Just a couple of thoughts on this game from Coach Osborne. Spoke to him on Tuesday. Let's see here. I think we're...
Now it's playoff time. Finish up the regular season.
Let's see how it goes.
You were in just about every game, though, for the most part. Yeah. Did a lot of learning. And what do you think of how the team reacted to most of those games?
I definitely think the kids learned a lot. And even just last week, even though we had a tough loss to Santana.
This is Coach Osborne.
About how the kids have just come along so far. I mean, from week 1 to the end, like, we were just like, honestly pleasantly surprised to see just in different facets of the game, like how they developed, especially the O-linemen. I mean, to see how they work with each other and how they're picking up their blocks and they're catching things like on the fly, last second, things that I wasn't even thinking our guys would get to until, the next coming years. So I was honestly just kind of taken aback to see that development in the kids, and they've really bought into everything, and I believe we're going to continue to see even more growth, and we're going to be even more competitive as the years go. And seeing the sophomore class really kind of take ownership of the team and take on like huge leadership roles, and our seniors, they understand how to be a leader now. That's taken a long time to get those kids into that kind of that mindset and development. It's just there's old ways and different ways, and it just wasn't working at the time. So, as every team says, playoff time for 0-0. And as we know, in our division, we have a very good chance to make a run at next year at the end. I mean, if we take the competition level that we've had to face and then we kind of equate that to our division, we're going to be a tough team to compete against.
And what do you think of your first card you've been dealt with Army-Navy?
As one of my past jobs with the Rock, we actually played them, and they're just kind of they're a sound team.
He coached with the Rock. I don't know if you heard that.
And I know them as being a disciplined team, and they have a few explosive players on both sides of the ball, and they can definitely exploit us if we're not doing well, especially up front. That one kid, I don't know his name, is number 56. We were just watching on film. The kid's real explosive, great hands.
He's referring to number 56, I guess, of Army-Navy. Big player.
I think our game plan is definitely fit to win it, and but we're gonna have to be on top of our stuff, and I know that they're gonna show up too. They've been winning, they've been figuring it out themselves, so they're kind of in a similar boat. I feel like
Okay, I just wanted to share some of those thoughts. I mean, you heard that really Coach Osborne is pretty confident that in D5 he could pretty much survive or not survive, but beat any of those teams that are in the division. And you know what? I tend to agree with him. I think that all of those are winnable games. And I don't know if you heard that too, Ramon, that he referenced a lot of the teams and the talented teams that they did have to face, some of them even in higher divisions. I think that does make them a favorite as far as, and they're healthy. They got Gordon back. I think that could play huge out having Kal-El on both sides of the ball. And, there was so many games that they played pretty close to. No one's really blown out Cajon Valley per se, with the exception of the first game of the season. And as of recently, got beat up a little bit, but for the most part, they've been in every game. So I think,
yeah, go ahead.
I think that they are very capable of beating any of the teams that they face. And with this Army-Navy team, as he mentioned, I don't know if you heard, I didn't even know this, that he coached with the Rock previously. I don't know if he was the head coach, maybe an assistant coach, but he knew some things and how they do things at the Army-Navy Academy. And the record looks better, but at the same time, I think Cajon Valley played a little bit better opponents. And I think one thing that they've been able to do is survive and the injury bug. So I'm going to have to say, even though they are up at 10, I'm going to say, and on the road, you could see, and I'm going to say that because they have Gordon and because they have that line, and let's not take away from their quarterback as well. I mean, they have some playmakers on offense and defense. I'm gonna take Cajon Valley on the road. I don't even think it's a gamble. And I'm gonna take Cajon by 7.
Well, if you're going by the computers, you'd certainly get a few points. Army Navy probably favored by a few points in this game, maybe even as much as a touchdown. But you mentioned Gordon. He's definitely looks like he's healthy and back, right? He had a 73-yard run on the second possession of the game. Remember Santana and El Cajon, they kind of went back and forth in the beginning of their game as well. Daniel Jacobs, you mentioned him at quarterback. He passed to Shane Hobson. Hobson, a beautiful one-handed catch, 22-yarder. The Braves trailed just 20-12 at halftime. Ruben Cosio, he had an interception. He also blocked an extra point. So the Braves are, what can you say? I mean, they are playing well. They had to go up against the Hills League teams that they're going to be, that are for the most part going to take them down. That they did get the win. You mentioned the win over Monta Vista. So yeah, I mean, I think the Braves can definitely be in this game with Army Navy. I do have my concerns about them winning this game, but remember, Dave, the Braves back in 2019, they won they beat Mountain Empire for their first playoff win in 7 years, and Army Navy, they're terrible in the playoffs. They've lost 8 straight playoff games. So the last win they had, yeah.
And courtesy of our Mountain Empire, the ones we'll be talking about shortly, the Red Hawks did it to them too. So, hey, the chances for the Braves are fantastic.
Well, the last time Army Navy Academy won a playoff game was in 2008. And my historical note on this one is that the first time that Army Navy played in a playoff game. So this is the motivation. If I'm Coach Osborne, I tell the guys this. Okay, when Army Navy played a playoff game back in 1920, Dave, they lost to the San Diego High team. It wasn't the Cavers back then, it was the Hilltoppers. And the final score of that one, still an all-time record, was San Diego High 130, Army Navy 7. So they can be beaten in the playoffs, obviously. If it happened 100 years ago, it can happen this Friday night. I've got Army Navy Academy winning this one by a couple of points. Yeah. Well, you can make up some ground on me this week. All right, let's get into our last game, Dave. No one is stuck around. We have 0 viewers, I think, but except for our friends, hopefully out in Pine Valley, or hopefully you're tuning in later as well. But hey, Mountain Empire and Crawford, Dave, we know these two teams played already this season. Crawford was third in the Central League, and they played one of the most interesting scores of the season, right? This year, the Colts won 8-0 in week 4. Dave, remember that game?
They've had a lot of weird scores
Well, that's true.
this season, whether it be a blowout or a 7-3. I'll just say that this is a great game.
Great opportunity.
And this is what I've been. I would almost. It seems like I'm pestering Coach Van on Corey Van if he's coming back yet. From what I understand, he said Corey Van would love to play this week, and he is so close.
Really? What do you know?
But we are going to continue to sit him out. I'm really hoping that's another reason why I'm hoping they win this one so we can see him back in action, because I think he could be a real difference maker. No offense to the current lineup. Coach Van says he thinks we've adapted to our offensive playing style since the last time we faced Crawford. We need to continue to play the hard-nosed defense led by Larry Clark, and we have all season we have had all season, and we cannot this game make any mistakes on offense. And this is absolutely true. They cannot turn over the ball. But I think, as you mentioned before, it is a great opportunity for the Red Hawks to get a big win and to move on. And gosh darn it, hopefully they will get Corey Van back in that lineup and chucking the rock, because I think with the combination of Corey throwing to his receivers and Larry Clark carrying the rock and then making tackles on defense, I think this team could win a couple of games. And
they've got to avenge that loss, Dave. That was a bad loss. I think they'll admit it. Now, I know they were trying to work through the offense, because I think that was the second game, right? They got beat by Mission Bay, but they were without Van, right, for a couple of games, and they were trying to get and they just ran into a Crawford team who's obviously not, well, they're 3-7. I mean, they're Crawford, so Mountain Empire can win this game, but it's not going to be necessarily easy. I think that the computers definitely have Mountain Empire, I think, leaning to win this one. So I think they should be able to win. I just the fact that it was 8-0, they didn't score before, but like you said, I mean, they do have had some funky scores, right? So
yeah, but here's the thing, and then you got the blowouts that they had. You know what? I think that Mountain Empire's record is really quirky, because they came so close. I mean, come on, within 4 points of beating Hopeville on their own field. That gives you a fifth win.
Even last week against Palo Verde Valley, Dave, they only lost by 2 touchdowns. Not just only 2 touchdowns. Palo Verde Valley, they were the champs. I mean, they're having a great year, number 1 seed in the division.
But 2 games with Hopeville, they could have won both of them. But they led Hopeville in the other one too. That puts them right there at 6-4. And then if they would have beaten Crawford, they could have been 7-3 going up against this Crawford team right now, or probably not even facing a Crawford team, facing a much tougher team. Would you be surprised if Mountain Empire and Cajon Valley ended up playing each other again?
Well, the winner of this game will play Palo Verde Valley. So I would have to say, honestly, yes. But that doesn't mean that Mountain Empire, I mean, they prove themselves week in and week out. Hey, against Palo Verde Valley last week, Dave, Larry Clark, I mean, what can you say? He had 11 tackles. He had 50 yards rushing. He had a touchdown. Cody Whitehead, nearly 100 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns as well. Larry played outstanding. Mannix Gonzalez was in there at quarterback. And, I don't know. They said day to day, Dave, after last week's game. So, um, I don't know. What it?
That's all I get.
Okay.
That's all I can get from
Okay.
the Corey story. They don't.
All right.
I
Well,
get.
that's fine because they actually can win. Probably, I don't say without him. I think it's a difference maker if he's in there. We have to predict it. I think as if I don't know. We have to predict it because that's what we do. But it's such a difference maker. I will tell you this, Dave, and this is, this is the historical, but it is significant. I would say that in this series that Mountain Empire has never beaten the Colts ever. They're 0-7 against them. The Colts run a little more than 75% of the time. They have 3 guys specifically who carry the ball. They all get it around 8 or 9 carries a game. Very balanced. So Crawford 3-0 in home games in the playoffs of late. So I'm going to go with Crawford by a point.
Well, I've gone against him a couple of times and eaten crow a couple of times, but I just think that this is one of those games that Mountain Empire, even though they're going on the road, I just don't think that Crawford is that much better than Mountain Empire.
I don't either. I wish I could just say if Van plays, I think I got Mountain Empire, but I can't do that. I don't think they allow that.
But I still
can't list your pitchers.
But I still see Larry Clark being a big deal on both sides of the ball. If he can create turnovers and he can run that rock and mow some people down and score some touchdowns, which very capable of. I mean, he's done he's done double-digit rushing many a time. So I think my Red Hawks, I'm going to take them by 1 point, but I am going to take them with the win.
All right, let's get out of here, David. Long show. We don't have anything else I think we need. Unless you got anything, we're out of here. Great job. Great regular season. Look, we're going to have some winners. We're going to have some losers. The shows are going to get shorter from here. Let's hope we have long shows with a lot of teams moving forward, but good luck to all of our teams in the playoffs this week. All right. For Dave Dickens, I'm Ramon Scott. The playoffs are here. Thank you for joining us.